Hey guys, welcome back to The Grey Escape. We are back in business. What a relief. Had a little break over the holidays. Got to see my family in Canada, which was amazing until I had to say goodbye to them, and then crushing. So a good Christmas until the very end, and then just really royally horrible having to say goodbye. Yeah, but here we are. We're back. I'm excited to be back at this microphone again, talking to you, vibrating your brain with my voice, kind of like the Killing Me Softly with his song, but vibrating your brain with my voice. There's a song there. I'll work on it. Yeah, okay, so maybe I'm a little rusty. I'm going to get tuned back in with you right after this. Yes, I was in Canada, but now I'm back in the UK. And this week, I had the pleasure of interviewing a lady that I have long admired. Not only is she a brilliant writer, but she's kind of a ball buster, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying that. I'll tell you more about why I think she's a ball buster in a minute, but you may have seen her in countless documentaries on topics ranging from happiness to quantum physics and the power of intention. Or you may have read one of her best-selling books, such as The Bond, The Intention Experiment, or her brilliant book, The Field, The Quest for the Secret Force of the Universe. Hello! Count me in. I'm on a quest. I will go on a quest right now to uncover the secret force of the universe. In fact, I think I may have even seen the secret force of the universe, but we'll go more into detail next episode about that. Right now, this episode is all about Lynne McTaggart. Yes, her work has been described as a bridge between science and spirituality. Lynne, besides being an author of books, she also publishes a magazine with her husband, Brian Hubbard, who is also an author. The magazine is called What Doctors Don't Tell You, and I'm looking at a copy right now, and it has articles like mammograms pick up just 5 in 10,000 breast cancers. The mind is as powerful as painkillers. Lots of stats here as well. Little bulletins, just 15% of conventional medicine has absolute proof of working. Just 15%. This is in What Doctors Don't Tell You, which we are going to hear all about, where you can get this magazine, and all about Lynne when we speak to her in just a minute. But I want to tell you more, because I think Lynne is kind of a ball buster. And this is why. Because this magazine really delves into the behind the scenes of the pharmaceutical industry, as you can imagine, she has some people not too thrilled with this magazine. Giant corporations have tried to block her in her path to bring truth and research to the general public. And I think somebody who goes up against a giant corporation is kind of a ball buster. So she's kind of like a bit of a hero. Myself, I like to have everything harmonious in my life, and I don't think I would bode well if I had a giant corporation breathing down my neck. So massive kudos to Lynne McTaggart. And an important note, those of you who have been with me for a while with this show, you've probably heard me talking about my very strange, very sci-fi experience in 2012, best described as a near-death experience. Well, because it's starting to pop up, I don't want it to get repetitive for you guys. I don't want it to be like, oh, not again with the near-death experience. It was not near enough. I don't want that to happen. So I'm really not going to delve in. You'll hear me touch upon it, and that's it. If you want to know more about it, you can listen to other episodes. You can even drop me a line from thegreyescape.com, and I'm happy to send a little text that describes what happened to me. Super sci-fi, like we are talking Wachowskis, the whole shebang. So that's that. Now, I proudly present this little chat that I had recorded at Lynne McTaggart's offices in London, just a short walk from the Wimbledon Park Tube. Here she is, best-selling author, researcher, and lecturer, Lynne McTaggart. So the first thing, just quickly, is you're from New York. How long have you been in London?
30 plus years.
Wow. Okay. So this is very permanent then.
This is very permanent. I came over here in the early 80s to do a book on Kathleen Kennedy, who was the rebel of the family and who had married outside the church. She married a British lord. And all of her friends at the time, who were still living, about in their early 60s at that time, were here. And so I plunked myself over here to research and write it. And in the process, just fell in love with the country and then fell in love. And here I am.
Got it. Okay. And if I recall from researching you, you actually had a rather severe case of somebody plagiarizing your work on that topic. Is that correct?
I did. A well-known author, Doris Goodwin, wrote this book, The Fitzgeralds and the Kennedys, and there were giant chunks of my book that had been lifted virtually verbatim. And so we settled it privately. You know, we settled it and reached a settlement for it. And then it all came out in the press 15 years later when some Kennedy scholar notified one of the right-wing magazines in the States about it. And because I think there was another plagiarism issue. Plagiarism was on everybody's mind because some historian had plagiarized somebody else's stuff.
Okay.
And so it came to light, and I was more or less forced to disclose it, basically, because the press were hounding me, et cetera, and the other side were kind of minimizing what had happened and not really telling the truth about it. And so we did, but it's a long time ago, and it's all finished, and I'm fine.
As a writer, when something like that happens, I mean, I would think that must be the most devastating thing to happen. Oh, thank you. Hot water. Is this a secret potion that's been delivered? Is this what doctors don't tell you? Secret potions with Lynne McTaggart? Is that just hot water?
That is just hot water. But I was going to add some tea to it.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. This is all very fascinating. I want to know what's going in that hot water. Because I bet you it's really good. Well, do you know what I drank on my way here? Matcha.
Matcha green tea is fabulous.
Yes, I'm totally hooked on matcha.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
Well, while you put that together, I can tell you, this is totally me bragging to you, trying to earn brownie points, that when I was in Canada over Christmas, they have a store called David's Tea that sells loads of matcha, and I got a matcha beaker with a frother built in.
I've never heard of a beaker with frother built in.
I know.
That must be an American invention that I haven't been able to see.
Well, they have a David's Tea in Canada and America, and I'm not sure truthfully where the company was founded. So, but it's not available in England yet. But you can probably buy it online. But I'm all super into matcha. So you've got a green tea there.
I've got a peppermint tea, actually.
Peppermint. Okay.
But I mostly have herbal tea. Once in a while, when I'm feeling, frisky, I have an Earl Grey tea, and that's about as caffeinated as I get.
So no coffee for you?
No, I stopped drinking coffee when I came over here. I used to be an American coffee drinker, but I guess I just got used to to tea. It works with this damp climate.
Yeah, well, I guess so. I mean, this coffee is booming over here now, though.
It is, but I guess for me, I just kind of switched over to the dark side.
I mean, since we touched upon it, because whether I'm just choosing to believe my own path, that coffee has got a lot of positive health benefits.
Oh, it does. I mean, wearing my other hat, what doctors don't tell you, there's loads of evidence coming out about, reasonable coffee drinking, not excessive, is got huge health benefits, all kinds of things.
I even just saw an interview with you on Gaia television, and you discussed that coffee can help protect you from the sun because it somehow enhances the melanin in your skin.
The melatonin? Yeah. It's just, it's bizarre how many benefits coffee has, but it's, it's all about reasonable coffee drinking. A couple of cups a day are really good for you. No question.
So it's just a choice with you. Why don't you drink coffee, Lynne?
Well, because tea also has great benefits. And, a lot of it is just about what works for you.
Okay, fair enough. So we were saying about what it's like when you're a writer and someone knocks off your work. What's the first thing you do? Do you just call a lawyer?
Yeah. That's what I did. I called my publisher, and they put me in touch with one of the top plagiarism law firms who had been involved with the Alex Haley case with Roots. There had been a plagiarism situation with that. And they were phenomenal. I mean, and they just went through it and it got settled without having to go to court and et cetera. As I say, and there it stayed. And I had long forgotten about it when this just came out in the press. And the only reason because the other side talked about my being agreeable to all of this, and then some of the associates of the other side were trying to claim that my book wasn't well documented, I was forced to defend myself. And so ultimately I just gave the legal papers to the Associated Press because the whole thing had been opened up again, and because the other side had talked, I had a right to talk about my side. But, it all came out in the press, and the Associated Press thing was like an atom bomb that just stopped the whole thing. It just put it on every front page in America and basically was, this is how much of this book had been taken, and this is what actually happened. And yes, we settled, and yes, I forgave her, and that's the end of it. So, yeah. And it was, it was the end of it. But it was just a shame that it all had come to light. On the other hand, I think sometimes it's really important, if there's been some sort of wrongdoing like this, for it to be aired.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a Pulitzer Prize winning historian,
yeah.
So, I don't know if it had been deliberate. I think it was just reliant on researchers, who had cut and pasted things. And maybe there was a bit much of that. And it was an overwhelmingly big book to attempt. So there probably was just some sloppy research methods, but they have huge implications. So it's an important thing for a historian for any kind of writer not to do that.
Right.
So it brought out the whole thing. I think what happened as a result is there was a lot of discussion about plagiarism after that. And I thought that was a good thing because it was, discussed in universities. And now in the days of the internet where you can cut and paste so much, I mean, we found it just interviewing people for jobs with our company, people coming and cutting and pasting stuff and presenting it as their work. It's so easy to find out that this is the case on the internet.
Yeah, that's right, with social media. I mean, Shia LaBeouf got caught out plagiarizing a document that he had written. A big movie star. With social media, you can't hide. It's very hard to hide that sort of stuff.
I know, exactly.
They say that there's no such thing as bad press. Would you say something like that actually at least helped bubble your name around to a lot of people who may not have been familiar with your name and then your work?
I don't know. I mean, it certainly got the case around, but it wasn't necessarily the publicity that I would have sought.
No.
And I was actually concerned about the reverse. I was concerned about that eclipsing the launch of my book, The Field, which was happening in 4 or 6 months after that. So that was why I was concerned about making sure that my side got told, because there were some people that knew the other side that were, trying to be protective and were making insinuations about my research. And it was really important for me to clarify that I had done a really good job of research and I wasn't the guilty party here.
Right.
And so I really didn't seek any of that and would have been very happy for it not to have happened.
I mean, The Field, going on to The Field, it's so epic. I love The Field. I absolutely love it. How long did it take you to write that book?
I guess it took me, I started researching it. I started thinking about it in the early 90s. I then had children in between I had the second child in between, and then started picking up the threads of it in the late 90s, around 1998. And so I guess it took about 2 to 3 years, because it was about not only researching with the scientists and interviewing the scientists, but trying to understand quantum physics. Because I'm not a scientist. I'm just somebody who's interested in demonstrating things through science. But I never knew what I was actually even looking for with that book. It truly was a journey that I started without a compass in any way. I was just trying to find out why things like homeopathy and spiritual healing work, because in my work with What Doctors Don't Tell You, I'd come across these amazing studies. These are good scientific studies showing that these things work. And I kept thinking to myself, if you can have a thought and send it to someone else and have them get better, that in itself violates everything we think about how the world works, that nice, tidy Newtonian view that you can only affect something else by doing something physical to it, applying some sort of force or a good swift kick or something like that. So I thought I was going to find energy fields, human energy fields. And I thought I'll talk to a couple of frontier scientists who are looking into consciousness and things like that. And they'll tell me how it all works, and I'll write it up and finish it, and that'll be it. And I thought it was that simple. And I was alarmed, actually, surprised and then alarmed to realize that each of the scientists I was going to see all had discovered something remarkable, some aspect of the universe we don't understand. And they'd found a little pocket of something extraordinary that, again, violated our view of the world. But they hadn't put together the whole thing. And the main reason is scientists are really encouraged not to speculate about things. And I also realized that communicating it for them is difficult to a lay public because they're used to speaking in code. They talk in math. So after a while, I realized that, first of all, I was going to have to try to decode what they were saying. And secondly, if I was going to do this book, I was going to have to put together everything of what they had come up with into a kind of plausible theory. So that was the challenge. So it was my hardest book to date.
For people who may not have read the book or may not be familiar, how do you encapsulate the work that you've put into the field?
The field is really about a band of renegade scientists, all working in prestigious universities, but finding by accident something that doesn't fit the paradigm. And together, their discoveries create a completely new view of the world. They're on the brink of a scientific revolution. And basically what they've discovered is that rather than the world being composed of discrete and solitary objects, that we are all connected by a universal quantum energy field. And this has a huge, huge bearing on what exactly consciousness is, the fact that our thoughts are trespassers and they can be connected to other minds, that minds find other minds contagious, that consciousness is an actual something with the ability to change physical matter. There were all kinds of ideas about that in that book, but they all stem from the idea of the quantum energy field.
Awesome. It's awesome. I have to let you into a small secret of how I even stumbled upon you. And I know we have a bit of a time constraint, so I'll keep it short. In a nutshell, I come from an entertainment background, not a science background. It's been all the arts. And in 2012, I had what I can best describe as a near-death experience, which I've spoken about in other episodes. It's very simple, nothing dramatic, no hanging off a cliff, just a blood pressure crash.
Wow.
My temperature plummeted and I went ice cold but remained conscious. And I started to speak scientific information. And it was completely sci-fi. I had two people with me. A lot happened. I was talking for quite a long time about things I had known nothing about, but I felt intrinsically was the truth. And the end of the experience was a very powerful message about that everything is connected. And I felt this very strong connection to everything. It was very emotional, and also a very strong message when I was speaking was that basically in a nutshell, there's no solid matter. And it was all very scientific terms. It was everything is an illusion. It is all our perception of an infinite range of frequencies and vibrations. These are words that I would have never believed were true or been able to fathom until this experience. But of course, they're exactly true. Everything is a frequency and a vibration. So my life changed after this. The big message was everything is sound and music is the key. So I went on a very deep path of research into, sound healing, tuning forks, which is very prevalent in the UK. And of course, I soon came upon yourself and the field, anybody that was talking about the fact that everything's connected, anybody that had the wording in their books or speeches that everything is an illusion. People like Eckhart Tolle, who also talk about this, Greg Braden, of course. So that's how I found you. And the field was from a very dramatic, very sci-fi experience.
Interesting. You know, there are so many people that I talk to who have had a near-death experience and come back with something like that. It's like they've touched the skirt of the field. They come back with healing abilities. They come back with perception and knowledge. They can't figure out, where it came from. And so there is something that happens in going into that place that's quite interesting and dramatic.
Even my own field changed because I was blowing out electrical items for a period after this of about 5 days. Wherever I walked, I was just breaking everything. Have you ever heard in your research of people when they had near-death experiences of seeing any kind of geometry or geometric lattices of any kind?
Not really. The big thing that they came back with was this great spiritual feeling and sense, like Eben Alexander and his Proof of Heaven book, when he talks about coming out of that coma, that 2-week coma, and having this incredible spiritual sense, as well as that spiritual journey he took, and where he really had a feeling he was in heaven. But mostly I get changes in brain waves, big changes in ability to heal, like the woman Joyce Hawkes, who had got knocked out when I think a painting fell on her head. She got knocked out. She had a near-death experience and came back and could heal things. So it's that. Something amazing happens there. You touch a different dimension, I guess.
Yeah. For myself, I also saw maybe a different dimension as well. This is part of what I'm still researching, is what I saw, because my environment changed in front of me, and it was just a grid flawlessly aligned of energy balls. But if I looked over my shoulder, I could see the room and the people sat with me in the room. And of course, because I was so ice cold, they had covered me up with a big blanket. And I'm still getting to the bottom of what I saw. I spoke to a scientist who is at the forefront of cymatics, and he said that he thinks I may have seen what they refer to as the very fabric of space and time, like an energy matrix, literally a matrix.
It could well be. I mean, it's just, I don't think we can discount anything. That's the point. I think what we have to do is research all of this so much more, because there's so many commonalities in people's experience when they have this near-death experience that it really suggests, truth in it. It can't really be disregarded as the ravings of a dying brain, or a brain that is, that is on, some sort of strange place out of kilter. This has to be regarded as some other state that really has to be researched. And the people who have, people like Pim van Lommel, a cardiologist in the Netherlands, find these common threads throughout all the time of people having very similar experiences. Sometimes different things, but it has to do with a real sense of that, the kind of thing that happens with people, too, who have these mystical experiences, where, like Edgar Mitchell in my book, The Field, where he suddenly had this knowledge of everything being connected, and he felt it so viscerally. He just felt like he was connected to the entire cosmos. And that gets described over and over again by people in mystical states. So has to have very, very similar parallels.
Yeah, I mean, that is what happened to me at the end of my experience, was this absolute sense of connection, very profound and deep connection to everything, and the tragedy of it. And I saw visuals as well, and part of what I had seen was, people in Africa, and the tragedy of how are we connected to that, and yet we live our lives and aren't doing anything. I mean, of course, a lot of people are doing things, but most of us aren't. We just live an insular life, quite selfishly, really, while suffering goes on in other places out of the visual sight. So as you can imagine, it's been a very big path of research ever since, you know.
I can imagine. Absolutely.
So your book, I mean, the field is brilliant. One of the little details that I loved so much, I love little bizarre facts, is how the fetus of a salamander has an energetic field around it that is the shape of an adult salamander. How did you stumble upon that?
I just got that. I think I read that with Robert O. Becker's book, The Body Electric, which was really interesting about really trying to show that there were an early book about frequency in the body. And I think that's where he mentioned it, or there was some other research like that. Cyril Smith has done work on that. There were a whole bunch of people before Fritz Popp came along who were researching this whole idea of frequency coming out of the body and there being a current of injury. So I was just interested in those, but I chose the people whose work was really the biggest change makers. And for me, it wasn't just the kind of work. I think Becker did brilliant stuff with showing the body has some sort of electrical current. But for me, Fritz Popp was the big game changer because he's the one who came out with the idea that we're beings of light, that we are sending out a tiny current of light emissions all the time, and that our environment is sending back light synchronicitously. So we're having a little light conversation all the time. And also that this is controlling a lot of the body's functions. It's coming out of DNA. So this is finally 40 other scientists and the German government are agreeing with Popp, who died last year, you know. But it usually does take a long time for people who make these breakthrough discoveries to be acknowledged.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was aware of, was the dedication of people that you talk about in the book. Because you would say, and then, you know, a decade later, he's in this place. And it's like, wow, people have to commit their life to a theory, literally their entire life.
Well, you know, this is what a true scientist is. And there aren't lots of them. A lot of them have to make a lot of compromises in order to, you know, maintain their careers. But the real scientist is a true explorer who goes ahead and explores something, even if it's going to take him someplace where he didn't expect to go. I mean, that's a great scientist wants to be proved wrong, basically, because then he's found out something new about how the universe works. And all of these guys and women had discovered some, round peg that didn't fit into the square hole of established theory. And so they had to go with their experiments. And even if they didn't, agree with the prevailing worldview. And that's what made them incredible scientists and explorers. These guys who were really, not applauded, not rewarded, most of the time castigated for taking this kind of uncompromising stance. But they're our heroes because they remake our world one experiment at a time.
With all that you have learned and continue to learn about everybody being connected and everybody's fields affecting everyone else and the light conversations, how do you actually live your life differently from this knowledge?
I think that, first of all, I live it with much more of a sense of allowing things to be and having a kind of peace of, whatever happens. I mean, there's a Buddhist stroke scientist who once said to me, you never really land. When you jump out of an airplane, you never really land. And he was talking about life. You never really land. And I think that's such a profound statement because what it really says is you can't forecast how something's going to turn out. What seems to be catastrophe could be exactly what you needed. It could actually be the result of an intention of yours. And it comes to everything you want comes to pass. So I think that has been one of the big things. I think for me, my background is as an investigative reporter. So I'm a painstaking fact gatherer. That has been where I came from. And I think what has happened to me is a big, big shift because I've had to, through my intention experiments, and so many of the miracles that I've witnessed as a result of that, become a kind of a reluctant apostle of the miraculous, and so that's really shifted the messenger hugely.
And do you find there's a spill off with your family? I mean, you have 2 daughters. Mm-hmm. Do you find that they have the same awareness, would you say?
I think that they chuckle a lot about this stuff. On the other hand, I do think that they both understand the power of intention. One of my daughters definitely found that with university. I mean, she had applied, she only wanted to go to one place, which was Durham University, which is, there's sort of Oxford, Cambridge, and Durham over here in the UK. And that was reaching kind of high. And she applied and she didn't get in. So she got into a bunch of other good universities. But over here in the UK, it's quite cruel. They have conditional places. So they basically say, you've got a place here, but you've got to get 2 A's and a B on your final exams with your A levels. And an A level is a 2-year course, basically. You don't get the results till August, and you're supposed to be going to university in September or October. So August comes round. She got her okay in 2 good universities, but they both wanted an A in English and some other things too. And she missed her A in English by a hair. She was going to study English. Her original plan had been to study psychology, but she thought she needed more sciences at A level, so she decided, I'll just study English because that's my second favorite subject. So what happens is it's all done by a computer, and the computer basically said, you're rejected from both of the universities that have accepted you, that you've accepted back. So she's stuck without a university. Here we are in August, and she's supposed to go to university a month later. So what they do over here in the UK is you go on a thing called clearing, which is you see what's left in all the courses in all the universities.
The dredges of universities.
Exactly. But so we went through everything, and no good she was a good student. No good universities had English left. So I said, hey, let's look at psychology. What the heck? So, and I'm trying to convince her to wait another year, retake the exam, do something. So we started looking at psychology, and we look and look and look, and there under applied psychology are 2 courses left from Durham University. With the grades that she needed, she calls up, no, they don't need extra sciences. And we call, by the way, for an hour and a half before you get through, because it's bedlam. Everybody trying to call first come, first serve on these other, as long as you have the grades on these other things.
The American Idol of the UK. You're on the phone for an hour.
Unbelievable. Well, and we finally get through, and she gets the last of the 2 courses, and she ends up, she's graduated and she's married now, but she ends up with her degree in psychology from the place she wanted, Durham University. Wow. So there's a wonderful example of power of intention. It's all she wanted, and she focused on it, but it came not in a way that she expected.
Did she have a little vision board?
She didn't have a vision board, but she really had a sense of what she wanted.
Right.
And that is true in her life, and she's really very focused individual, really, really good.
Now, you were in The Secret, right? You were in The Secret.
No, I was asked to be in The Secret.
Why do I think you're in it? Is it because you're in so many things that are secret-y? Like The Secret about intentions?
Down the Rabbit Hole with the Bleep. I was in that, and I was in I Am, and I was in the Living Matrix, etc. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Those sorts of, the law of attraction, it became a buzz phrase with The Secret. And then there was a backlash. And you have been in these sorts of shows talking about power of intention and stuff. Have you ever felt a backlash yourself from this, talking about the law of attraction? No,
because I've really distinguished what I talk about with the power of intention. I mean, I think that there is a danger with the things like the law of attraction to think that intention is a really simple thing and it's just about manifesting, just think and grow rich, basically, as the book says. And it's about, then it's been trivialized into manifesting great wealth all the time. And what I've always had and made really clear is that I'm looking at what on earth consciousness is. And I'm basically saying, okay, guys, if intention is a powerful thing like this, and you can you are co-creating your world. How all-purpose is this? Can we, cure cancer with our thoughts? What are we talking about? Just changing a quantum particle, or are we curing and healing the world? And I always felt that it was really demonstration of a bigger enterprise, that we're really talking about something that is so powerful. It changes everything we think about how our world works, how we work, and our role in the world. So let's test that. Let's look at that. And let's not just get more stuff. Let's not use it just to get more stuff. Let's use it to heal the world. So I've always announced, the work that I'm doing is all about healing yourself and the world. And that's been the focus ever since. So there's never been a backlash against me.
Oh, that's good. Well, that's excellent to hear. I feel there's almost a shift against acquiring stuff right now. I noticed that a lot of the popular gifts were things like experiences. You can buy a card that will just buy someone an experience rather than an object. Mm-hmm. And I sort of feel a lot of a shift towards minimalist lifestyles, people decluttering homes. And do you think there's a bit of a waking up happening of people realizing there's more than just keep acquiring more and more stuff in their life?
Well, I think the people who are looking into the kinds of books that I write and other people write in this field are looking at a bigger buzz than the very momentary buzz that you get when you do just get a new car or a new something. I mean, it's really pretty exciting for about a week. And then after that, it is just one more bit of stuff. And if you're unhappy, you're still going to be unhappy. And I think people are waking up to that if they want to be truly happy, they have to change something really fundamental inside of themselves and change something away from the getting and spending mentality and the I win, you lose mentality that we've been brought up with. I mean, that was a lot of the book. I was exploring a lot of that with the book, The Bond. Really saying, hey, were we meant to be this competitive? And if not, how were we meant to be? And how do we live? How do we live? If we're going to talk about the new science and the new consciousness, what does that mean? What does it look like in terms of living and relating to people?
I mean, the opening of your book, The Bond, which I'm working on now, just reading it, it got me. It got the hairs up on my back because you open with a story. This isn't a spoiler because it's right at the beginning of your book, of being a parent and your daughter was cast as a star in a school play. And then another kid basically told lies to get the part and your daughter got bumped. Now, as a parent, I mean, I'm not a parent and I'm like, how would you even handle that, And that inspired you, right, to move forward into writing The Bond.
Sure. And what inspired me was I went to try to tactfully bring it up with the mother of this girl. Because, by the way, this girl was my daughter's best friend who lied to get the part given to her. So I tried to bring it up with the mom, and the mom just turned to me and kind of shrugged her shoulders and said, well, that's life. And that, I was shocked at the time, but then I started thinking about it and I thought, yeah, that's the life we adults have created for ourselves and our children. And was it supposed to be like this? And I kept looking at other things. And even our dog, Ollie, at the time, I kept thinking, looking at him with our next door neighbor, this dog, T-Bone. Ollie loved T-Bone. And there was no reason for him to do it. He was an unneutered male and she was a neutered female. Nevertheless, with a funny name like T-Bone, but nevertheless, when she would come over, he'd play with her and he was slightly bigger than her, but he'd let her win. And he'd also let her have first shot at his food and his food bowls and everything. And this was not the I win, you lose mentality we're told that animals have, that they're all about dominance and things. So, all of this started making me think, which is, a lot of times just what happens to me personally are things that inspire the books. But that really did inspire the Bond to say, well, was it meant to be like this? And if not, how are we supposed to be?
Right. And so the way that we've been brought up is to be competitive and to be the best. Now, I know, at least in Canada, there's a shift going on because I was just there for Christmas with my family and I went to my little cousin's hockey game. And they were telling me that to do hockey in Ottawa, Canada now, there's an anger management course, basically, you have to take. Not for the kids, for the parents. because the parents are getting into it. And they've had to change the rules. Well, they haven't had to. They've decided to change the rules that when you score 5 goals, you can't continue to score goals. You have to then score, say, 3 to get the next goal. So they don't want you to slaughter the other team. They want to have sportsmanship and the other team, even if they're not playing well, to get a fair chance and all this. And it's pretty controversial because it's very much diluting competition. So, I mean, where's the balance there? What do you teach in your kids? Are they into sports?
Well, my one of my daughters was a sports scholar, and she had a serious injury. She busted an ACL, which is one of the ligaments in her knee, and that ended her sports career. But she was never very competitive. And, you know, we noticed this. I mean, oftentimes she was just a superb athlete, but sometimes when she was in a running exercise, she would slow up in order to let the kid next to her catch up to her because she'd promised her that she would run with her, you know, so she wouldn't be worried. I other than fitness, I was absolutely okay. You know, I was very sad when she had the accident. But I realized that she's a highly creative person, and it gave her an opportunity and space to develop her art, which is brilliant. And she's going on to become a graphic designer. And so I see where, again, you never really land. You know, you don't see what's the real end point of something that seems catastrophic at the time. For sport, I think sport is an exception where it's okay to be, you know, to get out there and to try to win and to be all about teamwork, which is what she really loved. She loved the teamwork. She didn't really love slaughtering someone else, although she realized she could. And I think the time she did hurt herself, she was up against, it was her house in the UK. Her school has houses like Harry Potter, you know, right. Gryffindor versus,
of course,
you know, Slytherin.
We're all secretly wizards and witches.
I know, exactly. And so her house was playing against another team's house, and all of the kids on the top hockey team, all the other kids on the top hockey team, other than her, were in the other house. So she was playing against the entire other A team and still beat them all. So she would, but I think what we were always trying to say to her and always do say is, it's not about I win, you lose. You know, in real life, you don't step over somebody else to get to a position. So I think she recognized from early days the wrongness of what had happened to her with her friend and how that's not a real victory. If you have to lie to get a position, you know, you didn't earn it. So I think that was a really great message for her.
Also not a real friend.
No,
Horrible
not a real friend. And that's, you know, longer message that you watch as a parent when your kids finally see what you see with a little more perspective, that this one or that one isn't a great friend. But of course, those things continue to happen even as adults, you know.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. But I think, you know, what we've always thought is to try to teach kids, our kids, a strong moral sense of doing the right thing by other people and not having to step over them to get ahead.
You know, let's say you're climbing the corporate ladder. I mean, where does somebody start to try and tune in more with the more community supportive side of things as opposed to the I need to get the best that's available at any cost?
I think that, you know, more and more, as I've written about in the Bond, companies are recognizing that kind of intercompany competition, you know, for instance, like Microsoft was doing that. And Jack Canfield, the success coach, was telling me once that they had such competition between these little groups of subgroups of the organization working against each other that it hampered innovation. Whereas at Google, people were rewarded together. There was much more team spirit, and people were much more innovative as a result. And so I think companies are starting to get this now, that it's not about creating a climate of fear, because that's what competition breeds all the time. I may or may not get ahead. I think what's really hard with children is to undo the kind of fear and competition that gets created at schools one of the things that we chose was for both our girls in their, up until the time they were about 13, in one case 16 with the other, is choosing a school that was deliberately not competitive. And it had the closest kids. My youngest they used to hug each other at the end of every day. And it was a relatively conventional school, but it didn't advertise who did best. It didn't constantly parade out the A students. And the A students were working side by side with the C students. And that really bred an atmosphere of cooperation that I think is really, really fantastic. Was the one really great thing that school got right.
Did they hug everyone in their class or just their best friends at the end of the day?
Well, they hugged a lot of the kids. I mean, there wasn't bullying that I could see. There was hardly any bullying. There was just a real good sense of camaraderie among the girls and the boys.
See, I found hugging way more common in America. I find British people aren't very huggy at all. They like the 2 air kisses on the cheek, and I'm not into the 2 air kisses. I find them horribly awkward. I like a hug, just a proper hug. And it's very normal in America, but yet it's not happening over here, the hugging.
Well, I think the kids were, I mean, I saw my kids always hugging their friends and things. So at least that seemed to happen.
At this school, it seems, yeah.
Well, in some of my girls and in some of their other schools too. But I have to say, that was an interesting experiment that the school got right. The difficulty of having to deal with national curricula that force the kids to take tests at certain, times and places. So they'd have to deal with that. But as I say, the really important thing was they weren't shoving in the kids' faces that some kids were A students and others were C students. And I think that really was powerful because it wasn't creating competition between the kids.
Right. You are very multifaceted with your career as an author, and you're a speaker and a magazine publisher. And there's a very strong other side to you that's the opposite of the spiritual side, where it becomes very medical. And I know that you're very passionate about anti-vaccines. So perhaps you can talk about where that came from. Was that from being a parent?
Yeah. I mean, the first issue of What Doctors Don't Tell You was published after our youngest daughter was 3 months old. Our very first issue was about the MMR vaccine because I wanted to research, should we give her this shot or not?
And that is measles, mumps, rubella, right?
Absolutely. Okay. And I wanted to look into all the vaccines to say, should we give her these shots or not? And what we recognized in researching it was that the science did not show that most vaccines, you have to ask the questions, how effective are they? How safe are they? How necessary are they? And pretty much most of the childhood vaccines failed one of those tests. But we put them to scientific tests all the time. And that was just one of the many interests I had in medicine, because in the mid-'80s I got ill after I landed over here. And it was just a messed up microbiome, as we would know now in 2016.
What's a microbiome?
It's the bacteria that reside in your gut.
Okay,
the big couple of pounds of bacteria that reside in your gut that really constitute the issue of most people, whether they have indigestion or allergies or all that kind of raft of issues, gut issues that affect the rest of them. And so I didn't know this at the time, nor did anybody else. I went from doctor to doctor. They didn't know what was wrong with me. And I went to from first conventional alternative medicine to the very outer rim of it. And because I couldn't find anybody to figure out what was wrong with me, and I seemed to be getting worse, I realized if I'm going to get better, I'm going to have to research this myself. So I researched and finally found what I thought I had. And then I researched the right nutritional doctor, a real pioneer, to heal me. We worked together to get me better, and it took about a year. And in that process, I just got so fascinated by the idea that, we had this kind of partnership. He wasn't treating me like a child, as oftentimes is the case with medicine. He's treating me like a partner, and we were working on my illness, and we were going to get me better as a partnership. I was so impressed by that I probably got very boring on the subject. And so Brian, my husband, said to me, well, stop telling me, tell the world. So that's why we set up What Doctors Don't Tell You. It was out of a great passion we figured that if people got more information about the problems of some conventional treatments and the better alternatives, safer alternatives, these should have some evidence there for them, then that would be helpful because people would be able to control their own health. So that's how we started 26 years ago. It was just a newsletter coming out of our front room, and now it's a magazine in 14 countries around the world.
Did your illness have a final diagnosis?
Yeah, it was just candida and allergies.
Okay.
And it was related to having a lot of mercury amalgam in my teeth at the time, and which is known to mess up the bacteria in the gut and made me very allergic. And it finally just, triggered over into candida and a lot of other issues. So at the time, that was a new thing. Now it's just workaday every day.
Mercury is it in all vaccines or a majority of vaccines? I know it's in
No, it's in some.
vaccines.
It's in some and not in others. And it depends on the country. Some have it in certain ones and some don't. But I had a mouthful of amalgam fillings, of mercury fillings. So obviously I got rid of all of those,
Right.
but that was one of the things that was causing my gut problems.
Yeah, I have read a fair amount, nowhere near as much as you will have read, but after the experience that became a very big rabbit hole of research in things we don't know. One of the things I came across very quickly, and it sounds very conspiracy theory, yet there is tons of information on the internet about it, is vaccines containing RFID chips. Have you come across this?
No, we haven't really researched that. I mean,
Okay.
we've looked at, you don't have to go very far to conspiracy stuff. You can just stay with the medical evidence. And you can look at that and see that many vaccines haven't had adequate research. I mean, a perfect example of that is Gardasil, the so-called cervical cancer vaccine. Many have had research that's been suppressed. An example of that is the measles, mumps, rubella, the MMR vaccine, where there had been some alarm bells by a guy called Dr. Andrew Wakefield, a gastroenterologist over here in the UK, who kept getting patients coming to him who were children, young children, who had gut problems that had developed one after another right after getting the MMR vaccine. And they were demonstrating autistic tendencies too, which had also come about after the MMR vaccine. So he got this over and over and over again. So he finally published some research saying, we really have to look into this. And he was never saying don't vaccinate. He was saying, well, maybe we should just break this up. Maybe the triple vaccine itself, there are 3 live vaccines, is causing the problem. And he got demonized. He finally lost his license over here to practice medicine. He's moved to the States. But meanwhile, about a year ago, there was a whistleblower at the Centers for Disease Control in the States. Now, the CDC had carried out research saying, no, there's no evidence of autism as a result of this vaccine. And they published this data and this research and the study, supposedly putting the lid on that whole idea. And this whistleblower came forward from the CDC to say, you know what? They manipulated the data. Actually, there was a big association between certain kinds of kids and the vaccine.
Wow.
But here's the real thing. If you want to look for a conspiracy, here's the conspiracy. It never saw the light of day in any major newspaper. It's only been published in alternative magazines like ours and alternative sites on the internet. So you have to ask the question. This wasn't, and by the way, the study was done again. This whistleblower worked with another researcher to redo and reanalyze the data, and they definitely found this association. That should have been published somewhere, and it never did.
Right. I guess you're probably familiar with Jenny McCarthy's campaign against vaccines because she had a child who was diagnosed with autism, and she was really ridiculed and took a lot of flack from what I've seen over the years.
Yes. Well, this is the terrible thing about it, is vaccines have become like the Holy Grail. Something that you aren't allowed to criticize or question. And I think, and of course in America, parents don't have a choice. The choices for opting out of vaccination are becoming less and less. You don't have the right to have a philosophical objection to it in most states anymore. So, and even a religious objection to it. So people don't have, if they don't vaccinate their kids, they have to homeschool them. So I think this is really wrong because it's very basic. If you're going to force a population to do something, you have to guarantee it's safe. And this is what we used to create all kinds of forms saying, if your doctor insists that you get a vaccine, have him sign this form saying he guarantees it's safe. There's nobody who will because they know they can't. And they're only playing with epidemiological numbers. They're saying, oh, well, it's safe for most kids, but there's going to be some fallout. And there's going to be a certain number of kids whose lives get destroyed. But hey, overall, it's good. And that only works if you're not the parent of that kid whose life got destroyed. We've talked to many hundreds of them. And, it's when it's you. In fact, we have a good friend like this whose child was developing normal, got MMR, and he is severely autistic now.
Dear.
And all you do is you look at that kid every day and you say to yourself, I did this.
Oh, gosh.
So, it doesn't just destroy the life of the child, it destroys the life of the whole family.
Oh.
So for me, this is completely wrong because let's just look at the whole premise of vaccination, which is, herd immunity. Well, if vaccination works, then all the people whose kids have been vaccinated, they'll be protected. And the people whose kids have not been vaccinated, well, that's their choice.
Right.
And if their kid gets the illness, that's been their decision. Why should it be anybody else's? So it goes against the whole thing of vaccination. If it works, then what's the problem here? All the people who decided to go for it.
Right.
But what they're really saying is, no, we don't want to just protect children. We want to eradicate the disease, and we can only do that if no one gets it. And of course, that has to assume that vaccine will always work. And there's no study demonstrating a completely 100% take-up rate, So it's built on all kinds of faulty premises. There's so many things wrong with it, which is why we cover this periodically.
I mean, just with 2 clicks online for Gardasil, I came up with horrific statistics of, over 100 girls in the US, young women, like between the ages of 9 and 24, dying after they had the Gardasil vaccine.
Yes.
Not necessarily immediately afterwards, but developing complications that led to their death. I mean, really horrific stuff.
Yes. I mean, I think we did some research showing that there was some really bad DNA that the vaccine had in it that was causing these horrific situations. We spoke with some of the parents of children who were completely healthy, get the vaccine, die. And of course, most of the doctors are saying, oh, there was just a real coincidence here. Well, if you got a healthy, sporty 18, 19-year-old and they suddenly drop dead, or they develop this really bizarre illness right after vaccination, well, there's a saying called Occam's razor in science, which says, look to the most obvious. If you hear hoof prints loudly, don't think zebras, So it's right there in front of us.
You mean it's a horse?
Yeah, it's a horse.
Just so I'm clear.
It's a horse. So if your kid is healthy, takes a vaccine and dies, don't think it's some really weird thing in their background. Look at the association between what she had most recently and she had a vaccination.
I mean, I'm a living testimony to a near death from the pharmaceutical industry. When I was a bit younger, I took Accutane because, working in television since I was a kid, and I used to get acne, and it gave me a lot of stress emotionally. and I was very self-conscious, and it was tough to get breakouts on your face, and then you go do live television. And I was put on Accutane, and never once was it mentioned to me that you can have a very severe reaction with your mood. And unbeknownst to me, I was living in LA and I became very, very depressed. It was back in 2001. And ultimately, I became really suicidal, and I just thought it was my life events. And I really almost killed myself. I wrote a suicide note and was going to kill myself. And I'm also a painter, and I just finished a big mural in LA of the Sistine Chapel, and I had these very expensive paints left. And I guess I didn't kill myself because of a sense of value, that I didn't want to waste these really expensive paints. And so my plot, I wrote my suicide note, was going to use the paints, splash them around, know that they'd gone for a purpose, and then top myself. And I painted some abstract paintings and ended up locking myself away for 30 days painting, and I was cured of wanting to kill myself.
Wow.
And went on to become sold around the world as an abstract painter from wanting to off myself. But this was Accutane, and when I went to research this, again, at the time, and we're talking 2001, 600 teenagers had killed themselves. And the common thread was they were all type A. So these were not depressed students. They were really sort of trying to thrive at school, which I always was. They were pursuing things. And then they went on Accutane because of their, again, pursuit to be successful and look their best. And they killed themselves. And it was horrific. And, you know, I'm like, how is this possible that a drug is sold and we're not told about this? And I could have killed myself. You know, and I got a call one day, ironically, from a company doing a class action lawsuit, because they were bubbling all over the place, class action lawsuits against Accutane. And it was almost a comedy sketch in itself, because they're like, have you ever taken Accutane and had a bad effect? And I was like, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Thank you so much for calling. And they ended up saying, did the person end up terminating their life? And I was like, no, I didn't.
Wow. So that
and they said, oh, we're sorry, we can't use you. And I'm like, what? I almost killed myself. And they said, no, but you didn't. So we can't use you anymore. I mean...
Well, how could they use you if you did terminate you?
Preposterous. Exactly. It was preposterous, you know.
Well, the interesting thing is, if this isn't just... a one-off with Accutane or with Gardasil. We see this, and as I say, we've been doing this with this magazine for 26 years, or we've been doing it as a newsletter for 26 years, and we turned it into a magazine in 2012. So many drugs are, have serious, even fatal side effects, and this information is either suppressed or downgraded, basically. Or doctors don't know it. They will prescribe something because, this is one of their tools. A doctor learns two kinds of tools, which is drugs or surgery, basically. And, other than the modern and progressive, innovative, integrative doctors who are trying to use that, use conventional and alternative medicine together. But most doctors, that's their whole toolbox. And they don't have time or ability or even training to keep studying the medical literature, mostly time, to see what's happened with drugs. And also you've got the incredible lack of ethics with the pharmaceutical industry. It's the most profitable industry in the world, one of them, and it is also one of the most deceptive. And there's a guy called Peter Ghosh, who is the head of the Danish Cochrane Collaboration, which is the organization here and there and around the world that studies medical evidence on particular drugs and things to say whether or not that therapy has been adequately proven. So Ghosh he's an MD, he's a researcher, one of the top researchers for the drugs industry. And he's published a book called Deadly Medicine and Organized Crime. And basically he says the pharmaceutical industry is like the mafia. They've done everything the mafia has done. Number one, there's a huge layer of deceit. something like 3/4 of all drug research has been written by PR firms. And this has also come out in the British Medical Journal. It's not, we're not making up any kind of conspiracy here. This is well known in the medical literature. There are PR firms that exist just to write this and put a positive spin on drug research. And what happens is they get a ghostwriter to write up the study. They put a positive spin on the results, and then they get some well-known doctor or researcher to put his name to it. And that's how most of it happens. And so a lot of it is massaged, if not falsified. So a lot of this information is there, but it's suppressed somehow. And I think the other thing, too, is you just have to recognize that, overall, medicine's batting average is appalling with drugs. Drugs, correctly prescribed drugs, are the third leading cause of death now, fourth leading cause of death now. Correctly prescribed drugs. So, clearly this model of drugs for chronic diseases doesn't work. So that's why we came about, was to give people better alternatives, because we realized that when it comes to emergency medicine, there's nothing like Western medicine. If I get run over today and I want the best of high-tech medicine to glue me back together again, brilliant. But for anything else, any chronic diseases like arthritis, heart disease, you name it, medicine oftentimes doesn't know the cause, doesn't understand the cause, and doesn't know how to cure it. And I have a game I can continue to play, which is, name me one drug out there that cures a condition besides antibiotics. And that's the only one I can think of that actually cures something. I think there might be a drug for cold sores that might cure it, but that's the only one I can think of. And I've been trying this game out for 26 years now. So if you can think of anything else that actually cures, I don't mean suppresses, I don't mean, helps you manage to live with the condition, but actually gets rid of it forever, then let me know.
Right. And to be clear as well, I believe I'm correct in saying that your stance is you're not anti-doctor. You're quite pro-doctor, and the take is that they're kind of innocently misled sometimes. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, doctors are hardworking, in the main, are hardworking, dedicated, incredible individuals who have really worked so hard to get where they are out of a great desire to help people. And then they're given their tools. And they're given their tools in a medical school, which is a bully culture, which is dominated by the pharmaceutical industry. The only people they see for updates on this information are the pharmaceutical drug detail men over the years. And so they're given these tools, and they are lied to too. But they are, taken over by the drug industry. And one thing that we'd really love to do is set these doctors free.
Have you found with your, you're very prolific, and now you've got your magazine that's really out there, what kind of resistance have you found to you? Have you ever felt unsafe? Have you had threats of any kind?
I've never felt unsafe, but we have had threats, and we've had big resistance over here in the UK. A group of self-styled skeptics calling themselves Sense About Science, from the moment we published it as a newsstand magazine in 2012, started objecting very vociferously. They wrote to our distributors. They wrote to each of the store chains. They organized phony letter writing campaigns among themselves to object to the magazine in various stores. They even placed a story in the London Times about it, about us. Then, as Mary McCarthy once said about Lillian Hellman, everything she writes is a lie, including the words and the. And that was pretty much what this article was. It was a complete pack of misinformation and lies. Nevertheless, what ended up happening, which was really interesting, was our supporters got very vociferous about this and started fighting back. They started boycotting Tesco, one of the shops that pulled us out as a result of this phony letter writing campaign, to the point where Tesco said, wait a minute, they were boycotting.
Wow.
And so they put us back in again.
And Tesco, just for listeners, is huge in the UK. I mean, it's the equivalent of Walmart over here. It's everywhere.
Absolutely. And then they tried to, stop us in so many ways. And then for 2 years running, our readership voted us website of the year, health website of the year, over the National Health Services and Bupa, which is, insurance company over here. So it just galvanized our support even more. And now, as I say, we're in 14 countries and growing. So, our magazine, it's a lot of this information needs to get out there, and there's obviously a lay public who are really keen. So while there may be a small group of skeptics who don't like this and are, champions of the status quo, and also paid champions of the status quo. I mean, it came out that Sense About Science was also trying to weaken the argument that sugar causes diseases, pretty pretty self-evident by now, but they were putting out a lot of information saying, no, this is all untrue, when it was discovered that they got funding from the likes of Coca-Cola.
Oh, gosh.
And also the likes of and this was publicized, quite widely, and also the likes of the pharmaceutical industry, too. So these guys are paid lobbyists, basically, who are spreading a lot of disinformation. So I think the public, what they don't realize is they're trying to stop a juggernaut. The alternative medicine industry is growing by about 20% a year. People get that drugs and surgery don't work for all conditions, and that while, a very small minority, they can work brilliantly, in the main, they're causing a lot of harm. And so they're looking for other alternatives, and they need to be discriminating about it. So what we try to do, as I say, is to provide that information and to make the private conversation between doctors where they admit that things don't work. We try to make that conversation public.
So what is the best path for somebody who wants to stay savvy? I guess it's to use their own discernment and always look at both sides, right? Take a magazine like yours and hear what their doctor has to say.
Okay. For anybody who wants to find out more about what doctors don't tell you, what's really exciting is for U.S. listeners, we had it licensed in the States and we were unhappy with the other publishers' frequency. It wasn't coming out that much. So we've taken over the licensing ourselves, and we are launching our own magazine there in March. So it'll be out in the stores in Whole Foods and Barnes & Noble from the end of February.
Well, that's awesome, in Barnes & Noble. And can people subscribe online at all?
They can subscribe online, but they can also subscribe to get a paper version of it. Absolutely. And so if they come to wddty.com, they can find out more information.
And that stands for What Doctors Don't Tell You.
wddty.com.
There you go. And I'm holding in my hand a postcard of a very beautiful coastline, a very attractive picture of yourself, I must say. And it says the Intention Masterclass. And this is coming up and people can find information. What is it going to be about?
Well, one of the things that I do is work with people about using the power of intention. And I have developed this little way for people to work together in small groups. And we've been finding, and I've been documenting this and working with a university to document this, amazing things happen. Amazing healing effects happen with working with intention in small groups. So I'm running a masterclass retreat for an entire week in Costa Rica. It's the only one I'm going to be doing all year. And we are going to be we're billing it as Rewrite Your Story, Past and Future, because we're going to show people how to use intention to get over some of the things in their past that are preventing them from moving forward in the future. I'll be working in the workshop with my husband, Brian Hubbard, who has written a book called The Untrue Story of You, which is a whole model about the fact that we are three selves, not just one. And one of those selves is the past self, which essentially creates us. It's like an unwanted guest that takes us over. And how to get over that. And he knows this from his own experience because he used the model he created to get over depression from what was a verbally abusive childhood. He had a very abusive childhood. And so that worked for him. And then I work with people about rewriting or reclaiming their future. So how do you then move forward with what intentions you want and creation you want to have in your life in the future? So we do a lot of healing over the week, and it's also in the most beautiful country in the world. So it's running in Costa Rica. Wow. We're running with a fantastic group of people who own a beautiful boutique hotel right on the water, and it's very beautiful, very reasonable, the cost of a very reasonable vacation.
It's February 21st to 27th, 2016. And is it the same website? Okay.
No.
Oh, it's a different website.
Yes. Instead of my website, which is lynnmctaggart.com, it's the Global Journeys website, which is
globalj.org. And as I always do at thegreyescape.com, I always put links to all of the stuff that we're referencing. So I'll make sure the links to your
www.ty.com. Wonderful.
And globalj.org. I'm so grateful that you took time out because I know you're supremely busy. And you're awesome.
Thank you.
You're such a powerhouse, and I also think you're very brave because you seem quite fearless to just keep moving forward against giant corporations. So everybody head to the links and learn more. Read Lynne's books. They're amazing. And thank you, Lynne McTaggart.
Thank you. It's been lovely to be with you.
Lynne McTaggart, isn't she great? She sounds so elegant and classy because she is elegant and classy, which is what every ballbuster should strive for. In all seriousness, all of the links for all that is Lynne are posted at thegreyescape.com, as always, with bonus stuff, pictures, including the link to her magazine, What Doctors Don't Tell You, her own website featuring all of her books and what she's up to, and her upcoming Intention Masterclass in Costa Rica. Your blueprint for harnessing the miraculous life. That's what it says on the webpage. That's happening February 21st to 27th, 2016. So get on it if you need your blueprint for harnessing the miracles of your life. Then get on that right away. Special thanks to Lynne McTaggart and a little teaser now for my upcoming episode. I know I haven't done that before, but I really want to today. I had an epic interview with Anthony Peake, who is a writer who deals with the borderline areas of human consciousness. Kind of like if the show Fringe was an actual human being, it would be Anthony Peake. He's amazing, and we broke records, both of us. It's an epic interview, and it went by in a heartbeat, because Anthony's research into the nature of reality runs deep. And in particular, he is a leading expert on near-death experiences. He will blow your mind. It's holographic, quantum physics, the nature of reality. So get your laptop that isn't really there and press the subscribe button that isn't really there, because we are getting our matrix on in the next episode of The Grey Escape. Thank you guys so much for listening. It is great to be back. Thank you again, Lynne McTaggart. You are a bullbuster. You're my favorite one. My personal bullbusting hero. And I will catch you guys all next time on The Grey Escape.